Hello, thank you for allowing me to talk to you about a little piece of history. To start off, some of you may recognize this famous quote, "I can resist anything except temptation." As the author, Oscar Wilde is mostly known for being a poet and a playwright. But did you know, when he died at the young age of 46, it was widely believed that for over 70 years that he had contracted syphilis from a prostitute named Old Jess and died later because of it? Neither did I. Today I'm going to talk a little about the history of syphilis. By tracing the origins of syphilis, not only can we see how far we have come in the field of medicine, but we can educate ourselves on how deadly new diseases react to unprepared populations. I've spent the last couple weeks looking into this topic and wish to share what I have learned with you. I will be introducing the three main theories of where syphilis originated: famous people who were thought to have contracted the disease throughout history, a brief look of syphilis in Europe, and conclude with an overview of the progression of syphilis treatment methods. To start off, there are three main theories of where syphilis originated. The first theory I will discuss is the pre-Columbian hypothesis. In this hypothesis, it is suggested that syphilis is a mutation of other treponemal diseases. The supposed originator of syphilis is the skin disease known as Pinta from 15,000 BC in the Afro-Asian zone. The first mutation of Pinta at around 10,000 BC resulted in a disease termed yaws, a chronic infection that infects skin, bone, and cartilage. It is believed in this theory that syphilis is a mutation of yaws that occurred around 7,000 BC in an endemic form, meaning that it's always present in a specific population or region, and that the cooler climate shift in 3000 BC allowed the sexually transmitted version to emerge. In the pre-Columbian hypothesis, syphilis has been thought to have been around for thousands and thousands of years. As a clarification, treponemal is the genus of a species, meaning a biological classification in which species are structurally or genetically similar. The major species of human pathogens is called treponemal pallidum, with yaws and syphilis being a subspecies of that. In essence, the sexually transmitted form of syphilis, the version we are all most familiar with, some more than others, emerged from a mutation roughly 5,000 years ago, according to the pre-Columbian hypothesis. The second theory I'm going to talk about is the Unitarian syphilis hypothesis. The Unitarian syphilis hypothesis can be considered a variant of the pre-Columbian hypothesis due to the belief that treponemal diseases have always been a global problem. The distinction for this hypothesis comes from the theory that syphilis and other non-venereal diseases, those that are not transmitted sexually, are actually just different forms of the same infection. That these differing forms occur only due to the differences in climate and geographical locations. Essentially, what makes syphilis different from yaws is the environment, as well as the culture and contact distinctions between human populations in which the parent form, treponemal pallidum, was found. The advocates of this theory regard the Columbian hypothesis, the hypothesis I will speak about next, as irrelevant. They believe that yaws was already present in Western and Central Africa 50 years before Columbus's voyage, and that the mutation from yaws to endemic syphilis occurred when the disease came in contact with colder, drier climates where personal hygiene practices were abundant. Were not abundant. They believe that the endemic syphilis mutated into venereal syphilis when hygiene practices were abundant. The third and last theory that I will discuss is the Columbian hypothesis. In 1493, when Columbus returned to England from the New World, it is thought that the affliction syphilis was brought along as well. One of the reasons the Columbian hypothesis is so popular is due to the presence of two physicians sent by King Ferdinand of Spain, noted a familiarity between a new disease in Europe he had never seen before to a disease the indigenes had formed treatment methods for. The second physician acknowledged syphilis as an unknown disease, so far not seen and never described, when an outbreak occurred in the Galapagos Islands, specifically Barcelona. What points to Columbus and his crews being the originators in this hypothesis is a note made in a manuscript by the second physician, who reported that the pilot of Columbus already suffered from syphilis upon their return, as well as some other crew members. Oppositions of the Columbian hypothesis attempt to disprove it by carbon dating skeletons that show signs of lesions that are specific to syphilis. Unfortunately, this method has instead mostly supported the Columbian theory. Only 16 bone fragments with lesions were proven to be pre-Columbian. However, all of these bones were found in coastal areas where the carbon dating calculations needed to be readjusted due to the abundance of seafood in their diet, as seafood contains older carbon from the bottom of the sea. This may indicate that those 16 bone fragments are not as old as they were once thought and could be post-Columbian. And finally, another reason why the Columbian hypothesis is so popular is the radiocarbon date of bone fragments that show diagnostic characteristics of syphilis and were discovered in America were found to be thousands of years old. As it is a popular thought that Columbus brought syphilis to Europe, let us take a look at syphilis in Europe and some of the famous historical figures who were thought to have had syphilis. The first outbreak of a disease that manifested as pustules and was transmitted sexually, later proven to be syphilis, was discovered in the decisive battle between Charles VIII of France and Ludovic Sforza, an Italian prince. When Charles VIII was defeated and the disease spread throughout Italy, the French were blamed. It was the conditions of war over the Apennine Peninsula, fought by all the great powers of Europe, that propagated the fast spread of syphilis. In this 30-year war, many mercenaries and soldiers not only bought prostitutes, but they raped the local women and then married them as well. The severity of syphilis and the cases of fatalities were much higher than they are today, as the disease progressed faster than immunity could be formed. Venereal syphilis became endemic, meaning always present in a specific population or region. Another less popular theory was that syphilis was already present in Italy before the Naples invasion by the French. In this theory, it was the Jews, or any of those with Hebrew origin, who were expelled from Spain for refusing to convert to Catholicism, that they were the cause of spreading syphilis. On their journey to southern Europe and northern Africa, many Jewish immigrants stopped at the gates of Rome, where they were denied entry. It was here that an outbreak occurred and ended up taking more than 30,000 lives. Despite best efforts, syphilis managed to spread into the city, and the Hebrew immigrants were blamed. Moving on from syphilis in Europe to historical figures who were thought to have contracted syphilis, we are shown that the rapid spreading of syphilis was not hindered by geographical, social, or racial barriers. Famous characters from histories, such as Oscar Wilde, as previously mentioned, Friedrich Nietzsche, Casanova, Vincent van Gogh, Ludwig van Beethoven, Ivan the Terrible, King Henry III, and Charles V of France, and even Al Capone were either proven to be afflicted with syphilis or thought to be. Naturally, the more bohemian groups, such as writers, were more likely to become infected due to their promiscuous lifestyles. In fact, any figure who participated in prolific sexual activities were at risk, especially since mass contraception, which helped reduce the spread of sexually transmitted diseases such as condoms, were not widely available. In the event of a disease, it was only natural that scientists and doctors attempted to find a cure or treatment. Let's take a look at some of the agents and breakthroughs throughout history that were used to treat syphilis. When a treatment was first attempted, the native plants of the New World were used, specifically sassafras and willow. These purgative agents, as in they caused frequent urination and diarrhea, were thought to be blood cleansers and would purge the disease from their blood. Induction of perspiration, sweating, was also used as a form of syphilis treatment. In the late 1400s, mercury gained a foothold as a diuretic treatment in which the virus was purged through sweat saliva, and urination. Mercury was later replaced with bismuth salts. In 1908, Paul Ehrlich received a Nobel Prize for his accidental discovery of an antibiotic-acting compound. This drug was later replaced with another, less toxic one that also used arsenic as a component. It wasn't until Alexander Fleming in 1943 discovered penicillin that a main treatment with little side effects was implemented. Today, the treatment of syphilis is controlled by worldwide prevention and treatment programs, luckily. As a brief review, I spoke to you about the three main theories of where syphilis originated: the pre-Columbus, the Unitarian, and the Columbus hypotheses of the spread of syphilis throughout Europe and who was thought to be the perpetrators, some famous historical figures who contracted the disease, and ended with some of the early prevention and treatment methods that were used. As venereal syphilis was spread sexually, it was important in those days to attempt to resist temptation, as Oscar Wilde failed to do. Thank you for following me along on this brief tour of syphilis in history. Goodbye.